Um, anyway, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for coming to the press conference that we're having today on energy. As we know, energy is Alaska. Alaska is energy. We are an exporter of energy. We're a user of energy, and we thought this was an opportune time to talk about energy. We're kind of at an inflection point in many ways in the state of Alaska. An inflection point on our energy that we export, which is mainly oil at this point. An inflection point, and we're going to talk about this, on where we are with the gas concept, the large gas line concept, again, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Energy produced by other means, new technologies such as wind, solar, potential geothermal, other means, other projects that we're working on, and of course, energy here in the inlet. And the focus, I think, for most of us right now is what are we going to do about energy today and over the next 4 or 5 years regarding energy here in the inlet, which powers the rail belt. As we know, we've got gas in the inlet. The inlet was at once the major oil producer for the state of Alaska, going back into the 50s until it was superseded by Prudhoe Bay and other fields on the slope. We've been a coal user for many, many decades. We still are a coal user. And we're also a hydro user here on the rail belt with what's happening down in Bradley. But as we know, our gas supplies have been dwindling in the inlet. And that last year, during two pretty sharp cold spells, caused us to have real serious discussions as to what the future is going to look like. So last year, as well as years before, but last year we introduced some ideas to the legislature on things like royalty relief, and other approaches to stimulate more gas in the inlet. We believe the long-term solution is the big gas line. And I think we've got some good news to talk to the people of Alaska about that. We believe that we have other opportunities with regard to more hydro, and we'll be talking about that in a moment, but also some of the renewable plays that we're working on as well. But again, the focus, I think, for the next couple of years is going to be on the inlet. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, again, more energy coming out of the inlet. And there will be a discussion if we need backup, where does that energy come from for the next few years? So with that, I want to have Commissioner Boyle come up and just talk about some of the activity that has happened in the inlet for some time, activity that's happened in the inlet over the last couple of years, and what the outlook is going into the future on some concrete approaches to squeezing some more gas out of the inlet. Oh, you're right there. There you go. Come on up, Commissioner.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about Alaska's energy needs. You know, one, the department's been very appreciative of Governor Dunleavy's leadership, particularly focused on the energy question as we look across the state's natural resources portfolio to see where DNR can help contribute to that vision. As the governor mentioned, as we focus on the Cook Inlet to start, the Cook Inlet is a very mature oil and gas basin. I mean, it's approaching 70 years of age, you know, so it's already earned its ARRP card and, you know, would be collecting Social Security at this point if it was a person. However, it's an oil basin. And because of that, it means that over the past 70 years, all of the easy to reach, low-cost economic oil and gas has already been produced and developed. And so over that period of time, you know, we've seen a lot of companies, big companies, come into the Cook Inlet that were major contributors to Alaska's overall production. And then, you know, starting about 15, 20 years ago, we started to see that decline. The big players were no longer interested in increasing their investments in Cook Inlet. And at that period of time, we started to have talks about potential energy shortfalls. And a lot of you might remember cities along the rail belts were conducting brownout drills and the like. Well, that period of time spurred action. And we saw the passage, for instance, of the Cook Inlet Recovery Act. And under that act, we saw very generous terms. Some of you who follow the legislature may remember cashable tax credits and a number of other incentives that were really drawn up and designed to push further investment in the inlet. And guess what? The industry responded to that. We saw companies like Hilcorp and others come to the Cook Inlet take over ownership from some of the older legacy companies who had spent years harvesting oil and gas without doing a lot of further developmental drilling or exploration drilling. And the result was, is we saw a huge increase in both oil production in the Cook Inlet and natural gas production. And so, of course, because of that success, we grew complacent because we saw all this increased activity occurring. We were no longer facing energy shortfalls that we, were aware of. And so, time went on and eventually the legislature started to peel back and roll back a lot of those incentives that they'd put in place to spur activity in the Cook Inlet. We'll fast forward to 2022, when Hillcorp formally provided notice that they would no longer be extending contracts for their gas supplies. We find ourselves in a similar situation. And as the governor alluded, the state recognized that, again, one of the key drivers in Cook Inlet production is economics. Knowing that the easy oil and gas have already been produced, we understood that our primary driver to incentivizing further activity, to incentivizing more drilling, to incentivizing more investment, was to take a look at the fiscal terms. Now, proactively, what the administration has done through DNR is we have incorporated more novel approaches on how we have conducted our lease sales. So instead of having the old kind of royalty model for our bids, for our leases that we put up for bid, we have converted over to a net profit sharing model. That is, we allow companies to recoup all of their costs before they actually start to pay the state a royalty or a return on the oil and gas that's being produced. We took a more proactive approach in working with companies that we knew needed fiscal relief. So we've just actually, as of today, I believe public comment closed on a royalty relief application that we've granted one of the Cook Inlet suppliers. And the result of that effort by the administration led to the drilling of an additional well last year by Hex Fury, which, again, that well, that amount of gas will be making its way into the system and will help contribute, to the South Central's overall kind of energy mix. And so for us, we're doing everything that we can administratively to move those levers. We are very cognizant that there are still resources in the Cook Inlet. There are resources that we know about on state land. That includes current areas that are units, like the Kitchen Lights unit. That includes the Cosmopolitan field, where we know that there's actually substantial volumes of oil and gas yet to be produced. We know that there are some resources in federal waters that have yet to be produced. And as a lot of us know, federal policy and the bias of the outgoing Biden administration towards facilitating increased oil and gas leasing activity in the Cook Inlet, again, has been a factor in seeing some of those resources being brought to the table. We also know, based on USGS estimates, that there's still a considerable amount of resources that have yet to be discovered, or that might be technically available to be discovered, but yet have different economic challenges associated with their production. So our main focus has been to look to what levers can we pull that help incentivize this activity, that help make these marginal development opportunities economic. We feel confident that with the right amount of incentives, with the right amount of stewardship and oversight by the state, that we can see new gas being brought into production, and that Cook Inlet can continue to provide for Alaska's future, at least over the short to intermediate term. I think all of us understand that we need to be looking at those longer term options, which, as the governor alluded, has been very much the focus of his administration on those next big pieces of the energy puzzle that have to come into play. The other thing I'll just mention briefly about Cook Inlet that I think is important is the oil that's produced there. So oil, of course, is what has driven most of Cook Inlet economics. Companies found oil, they produced oil, which has a lot of value, and then the associated gas, they either had options to sell here domestically, and for many decades, they had options to export. Those export options are now gone. And again, as we see less opportunities to find new oil and produce new oil, that also leads to this challenge with supplying new gas, because even if you discover a lot of new gas, you might only be able to sell so much of it into the domestic market, and then you have to kind of figure out what to do with the balance. So some of the bills and legislative proposals that we've seen move through that the administration is working on now is creating new storage, so that as new gas is found, if it can be put into storage, there's actually that room then for folks that are producing maybe more than what current consumption would demand. But fundamentally, our outlook is that there is opportunity in the Cook Inlet. We think with the right mix of policy, we can drive more activity there, which producing more resources locally fundamentally is in the best interest of the state. And so under the governor's leadership, DNR will kind of continue to focus on those particular efforts. So with that, I will go ahead and turn things over to Curtis Sayre.
Before Curtis comes up, again, the legislative session is going to happen here shortly. And so internally, once again, like we have over the last couple of years, we're working on some ideas that have discussions with the legislature like we did last year and the years before. But again, Cook Inlet, we pioneered LNG export for North America, for the Western Hemisphere back in 1969. And, the goal is, again, in the future, using North Slope gas to do the same sooner than later. But again, the focus right now is going to be on Cook Inlet. And we're also going to talk about other approaches we have across the state that we're also working at the same time. But Curtis is going to come up and talk about some of the things that they've been doing at AEA over the last couple of years. But we'll get back to the gas in the inlet as we go through this program today, because again, it is crucial, and it does impact about 500,000 people of Alaska's 730,000 individuals that live here in the state of Alaska. So Curtis, if you come up and just talk about what some of the things you're working on.
Thank you, Governor. Sorry. Thank you, Governor. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today on behalf of the Alaska Energy Authority to update on some of the energy initiatives statewide. As a state energy office, AEA is dedicated to reducing the cost of energy in every corner of Alaska, from urban centers and to most remote communities in Alaska. In the last 5 years, AEA has secured nearly $1 billion in federal, state, and in revenue bond, which represents a 2,700% increase in our budget from just 5 years ago. These critical funds are being used to modernize Alaska's energy infrastructure and ensuring communities across the street, no matter how remote, have access to affordable, sustainable energy. And this poster board shows all the projects that we have going on in Alaska today. Not ones we did last week, not the ones we're going to be doing. These are active projects that we're managing, whether that's part of our PCE program, our power cost equalization program, whether that's through our Renewable Energy Fund, our Power Project Fund, or different transmission and own assets that we have. The map represents well over 200 different activities that we're doing at one time. We've actually in rural Alaska touched an average of 2,000 touches into rural Alaska with what we call our circuit riders, professionals that help rural Alaska in their energy needs. In rural Alaska, AEA partners with communities to improve and maintain and replace energy infrastructure in some of the most extreme environments on the planet. AEA has innovated a state-of-the-art inventory and assessment that uses reality capture and mapping technologies to assess the condition and infrastructure needs of 234 powerhouses, 292 tank farms, and 32 rural distribution systems and counting. For the rural power system upgrades, has greatly improved the quality of life of Alaskans. During Governor Dunleavy's tenure, $126 million has been invested in projects including repairs, maintenance, and construction of brand new powerhouses in several communities. Through its bulk fuel program, AEA has invested $80 million to extend the life and replace tank farms, in some cases as old as 60 years, ensuring safe, efficient fuel storage within 400 bulk fuel facilities across Alaska. AEA has what we call circuit riders, a team of trained technicians that provides hands-on support, operating training, and emergency assistance. We have declared emergencies and returned power to 20 communities. provided remote technical assistance to more than 2,000 instances, and delivered on-site training and technical assistance on 442 occasions. The Power Cost Equalization Program, AEA administers the Power Cost Equalization Program, which provides economic assistance to 82,000 rural Alaskans in 194 communities. Through the program, utilities receive annual payments of approximately $50 million, significantly reducing the high cost of electricity in rural Alaska. In 2022, the governor signed Senate Bill 243, increasing the monthly energy limit for residential customers from 500 to 750 kilowatts, which is a 50% increase, further savings those Alaskans on their electrical bills. When it comes to grants and loans, AEA makes grants and loans available through power-related projects across the state. Now in the 15th year, the Renewable Energy Fund has secured over $327 million in state funds and successfully leveraged over $300 million of federal and local funds, with 85% of those projects benefiting rural Alaska. Since fiscal year 2021, over $47 million has been appropriated by the governor and the legislature in support of 61 renewable energy projects. There currently are over 100 projects offsetting approximately 85 million gallons of diesel fuel since the program's establishment. Another valuable tool is financing energy projects in Alaska in the Power Project Fund. This resources have been instrumental in funding two of the state's largest solar farms, as well as the largest rural hydro facility down at Prince of Wales Island, making the island almost 100% renewable. Transmission organization, one of the most significant energy policy challenges in the rail belt in over 30 years, or changes, has been HB 307. It established the Rail Belt Transmission Organization as a division of AEA. The governor introduced legislation to eliminate transmission wheeling charges, establish a single open access transmission rate in the rail belt. What does that mean simply? If you look at the rail belt from Homer to Fairbanks, power leaves Bradley Lake. The line is owned by AEA. Then it is owned by Homer Electric Association. Then it's owned by Alaska Energy Authority. Then it's owned by Chugach. Then MEA, back to Alaska Energy Authority, and finally with Golden Valley. So one of that is to unite that rail belt and operate it as one single entity with all the different operators. And so it is a herding cats, and that's what we're doing. And we had a deadline to adopt bylaws, establish a charter, submit an application for certificate of public convenience and necessity to the RCA. We introduced that last month, gave that to the RCA ahead of schedule. The Railbelt Transmission is now developing the actual open access transmission tariff and recovers the Railbelt backbone transmission cost, or all the cost to operate that line. And statutorily, we need to have that to the Regulatory Commission of Alaska by July 1st, 2025, and we are on track to do that. HB 307 also fundamentally reshaped AEA's operations by establishing its own distinct board of directors. It's something we had 30 years ago, and for 30 years we shared a board with ADA, and now it takes us back to having our own board, which actually better equipping the state's energy office to address Alaska's unique challenges and opportunities with board members that have key expertise in those areas. When we talk about railbelt energy, on the railbelt, AEA owns Bradley Lake Hydro Facility, which is down outside of Homer. It's the largest hydro facility in the state. It provides 10% of the railbelt energy. It runs about a 120 megawatt facility. Low cost, 4 cents is the cost of power when it comes out of Bradley. And it serves 75% of the population, of which the interior of Alaska, Golden Valley, receives 17% of all power from Bradley they receive. So it's clearly a statewide. And then with AEA's ownership of the transmission line between Willow and Healy, it saves Fairbanks another $30 million in energy cost because we can transport buying power cheaper and Bradley Power moving it up to Fairbanks than what they could produce on their own. So that alone is huge for our friends in the interior. One of the biggest projects that we're working on is the Dixon Diversion, which is set to expand the Bradley Lake Hydro Facility. It's a $342 million initiative, which is to redirect water from the Dixon Glacier to Bradley Lake Reservoir enhancing energy production and providing renewable energy and benefits the rail belt system. That also includes raising the dam by 14 feet. And where we are, we started that process in 2022. Thanks to the governor and what's included in his budget, we plan to file with FERC this time next year and be in construction. This will increase Bradley Lake's output by approximately 50% or 30,000 homes. It reduces 1.5 billion cubic feet of natural gas demand annually, which is equivalent to 7.5% of the rail belt's projected unmet needs in 2030. So it's a big mover. As far as the construction phase, from 24 to 2030, the jobs created, direct, indirect, and induced, is 3,200 jobs. It will have a total economic output of almost $600 million for that project. Then you tag it on with the Sterling Soldotna Quartz Creek substation. Doesn't sound real sexy being a substation, but it's a 40-mile line. It's a $90 million upgrade. 88% of the power goes from Bradley, goes through that line, and it's constrained as far as not being able to maximize the amount of power. And we actually started construction this past fall. We're in construction today on that project. And its jobs creating 460 jobs and has an economic output of close to $100 million. And then, as many of you know, we were successful in what we call the GRIP, Grid Resilience of Federal Funding. The High Voltage Direct Current Submarine is $413 million. And that is a 38-mile cable across Cook Inlet between the Kenai Peninsula and over to Beluga, which is into Anchorage, which gives us the energy resilience and reliability, increased power transfer capacities, obviously additional clean energy, and it also is going to help serve 5 military bases to give them a second line off the Kenai Peninsula. That alone will create 1,400 jobs, and the economic output is well over $300 million. That also is under construction right now. And we are to, by congressional mandate, is to have that project done by 2032. That was a $406 million grant. To put it in perspective, there were 700 applications, 58 were selected, and Alaska and AEA received the 5th highest award, and it was a competitive grant. And so for us, that's a major accomplishment. But these key energy initiatives and underscores our commitment to modernize Alaska's infrastructure, which is creating jobs and ensuring affordable energy for all Alaskans. The Dixon diversion, again, we're going to be prepared next year or about this time in January of 26 to file with FERC and have that project completed with water flowing in 2030. The Sterling upgrade, we hope to be on track to have that completed by 2028, and the HVDC line by 2032. Together, these three major projects supports 5,200 jobs, spanning direct and indirect employment, generates $1.3 billion of economic activity, benefiting our local economy. Another significant milestone was achieved last month when our board of directors approved $28 million to support railbelt utilities in advancing their battery energy storage systems, or their BESS, a crucial step to enhancing grid stability and efficiency. It is important to highlight when the railbelt energy costs decrease, residential rates for rural Alaska also drop, thanks to the Power Cost Equalization Program. In closing, I want to extend my gratitude to the team at AEA for their efforts in driving these critical infrastructure initiatives forward, not only in rural Alaska, but obviously in urban Alaska. Their commitment and hard work are the backbone of our progress. I also want to thank the governor for his support of the energy development across the state. The successes of the last 5 years would not have been possible without his leadership and his strategic direction. And additionally, collaboration and support from our railbelt utility partners and the legislature have been invaluable in advancing these projects. Together, we're ensuring a brighter and more sustainable energy for all Alaskans. Thank you.
So, as Curtis mentioned, when I came into office, AEA was part of ADA. It was the energy arm of ADA, basically. But then we saw tremendous opportunities because of the advancement in technologies, but also we were acutely aware of what was happening in Cook Inlet. I've lived in Alaska since 1983. I've lived in the road system since 2004. And even though in the particular area I live, we don't have gas per se. We use fuel oil. I've got fuel oil, coal, propane, as some of you know, solar panels, wood, et cetera. Nonetheless, the majority of Alaskans on the rail belt are impacted by gas. AEA has been really focused on, again, for the rail belt, transmission, some distribution helping out some of the utilities, storage issues, and as was mentioned, in production of energy, a lot of emphasis on hydro, which we have here in the rail belt. And so what Curtis and AEA are working on are going to help us here pretty shortly with the terms of transmission, with open transmission lines that can provide safe, reliable transmission, we hope, for the next 50 years. But at the same time, working on things for rural Alaska as well, and energy for the next, I would say, midterm, but also long-term for Alaska. Next, I'm going to have John Sims come up with NSTAR. He's going to talk specifically about Cook Inlet gas, because that's what NSTAR does, is gas, and where he sees things, and what some of the things NSTAR is working on to make sure that we have gas today, we have gas next month, we have gas next year, over the next few years coming out the inlet, and make sure that the lights can be turned on for everybody here over the next few years. And after John, we're going to have Randy Rohrer come up, talk about what's happening at Ada, and then we'll have Frank come up, Frank Richards with AGDC, to talk about what I think is going to be a tremendous long-term play for Alaska. But right now I'd have John come up and say a few things about what he sees happening here in the inlet with NSTAR.
Thank you, Governor. Happy New Year, everybody. I just want to take a couple moments to chat about what we've been doing really since the announcement that Commissioner Boyle mentioned from Hillcorp back in 2022. Immediately when we got that announcement, NSTAR really started to evaluate what we could do, not only on our system, but in collaboration with the other utilities to ensure that we could still meet the power demands and the space heating demands for our customers. So right off the get-go, NSTAR, in collaboration with our partners at SERI and Northern Natural, we have spent $67 million to expand the Singsa storage facility down in Kenai. That's a critical facility that was built back in 2012, in part from that legislation that was referenced in the Cook Inlet Recovery Act, to make sure that utilities could store gas during the summer months to withdraw it during times of high demand. And as we know, back in January, we had a couple issues with that storage facility where we had a couple of wells that actually sanded in. So what we did this year was we allowed for 2 additional wells to be drilled. We did some additional facilities work. And then we also increased the capacity by 2 BCF. So critical infrastructure, we're almost complete with that facility upgrade, and expansion should be done in the next couple months. So that was a huge piece and one of the things that we look to do. The other thing, we're always, our main priority is Cook Inlet gas. And so we're very happy at the end of this year, or excuse me, end of last year, we were able to submit a contract to the Regulatory Commission of Alaska for approval that we entered into for Fury. That's new gas coming onto the system that will start in 2026. It's a 5-year contract. The price, as has been mentioned, is going to require a higher cost than it has in the past. Typically, we're in the $9 range. This, depending on royalty relief, is going to be between $12 and $13. So it is a jump, but that's what is required in the market today to make sure that we can, keep our customers warm. The last thing that the utilities are working on, really in collaboration with each other, is trying to find some sort of bridge solution until we can get to that long-term solution that the governor has been talking about. So we hired Berkeley Research Group right after that announcement from Hillcorp in 2022. We gave a presentation to the legislature and to the Regulatory Commission of Alaska about potential opportunities or projects that could help bridge that gap between the Cook Inlet and North Slope, or gas from some other location in Alaska. As you may recall, the first option, our main focus, is Cook Inlet gas. The second was finding some sort of in-state solution, whether it's North Slope or in the interior. And the third was really importing LNG. That's the only other option that we can, have to serve our customers. And so for the last year, we've been really diving in and looking at different project proposals, different entities that are bringing those solutions to us, and seeing which one makes the most sense for our customers. So at this point, we have entered into an agreement with a project developer, to evaluate and continue down that path for a specific project that will potentially bring imported LNG as a bridge solution. It's really critical to me that we maintain flexibility to utilize Alaska resources. So as we go down this path, we're going to ensure that from a commercial perspective. But we're still really early in the process. But we are very confident in the proposal that's been pitched, the entity that we're partnering with, and what this can possibly provide for our customers in the future. So happy to take any questions afterwards, but thanks for the opportunity to be here, Governor, and appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Randy?
Thank you, Governor. Randy Roraro, Executive Director for ADA. ADA's mission, very simple in statute, economic development and jobs. Can't get much simpler than that. We pursue that very strongly at ADA. We have a number of projects in queue. Whatever I say about them today, I've pre-cleared with project proponents to be able to provide some information to you. In the short term, ADA has passed a resolution financing Hex Fury's development and wells that have been mentioned earlier. We expect to finalize that agreement soon. Royalty relief is a key part of that financing package, so we're glad to see DNR moving ahead with that. That's helpful. We also have the IGU project, which is going to be switching over to gas from the slope, and that will decrease a bit the drain on Cook Inlet. So every gas molecule counts. Those are the near-term projects that ADA has that involve and relate to Cook Inlet. In addition, we have two interesting coal projects. One involves a new method of retrieving gas from coal in the Susitna Valley. As the governor mentioned, there's been use of coal and awareness of extensive coal seams in that area for decades, perhaps even before 1900. The technology is now advanced such that there may be opportunities to draw gas from some of those coal seams and provide power for the inlet. That's a mid to long-term solution. We are working with project proponents on that effort. It's going to take scientific geologic review, financial review, et cetera, before anything can come of that, but it is in the process and it is fairly interesting. In addition to that, on the renewables side, very early on, ADA saw that there was an opportunity in federal law to qualify as a state energy financing institution, which brings with it significant benefits for federal funding, loans, et cetera. That status, that ability to use that status has been hung up a bit in the administration of President Biden, but we think that some of the hurdles will be cleared away, and ADA looks forward to participating in the renewable energy sector. And under 1706, we can also finance transmission and other improvements. So ADA is active. We are financing projects in the short, mid, and long term. And we do work with the entire team you see behind you and the governor. And we'll be happy to work with the legislature on additional energy solutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. You can see that it's an almost all hands on deck approach, has been for years. We're going to continue to do that. We're going to actually up the game a little bit with the new administration that's coming in, the Trump administration. That administration has made it clear that they are all in on everything. And that includes things like gas and coal. So in Alaska, we have tremendous coal reserves. We don't talk about that much anymore, and coal has taken on a bad connotation because of the carbon issue in the environment. But the state of Alaska, because of its scale in terms of size and population spread out over a subcontinent, it's difficult to land on one energy generation use. We've had these conversations for decades. If you get 10 people in a room, even today, and if you said, okay, raise your hand if you want coal, you might get 2 or 3 hands up. Raise your hand if you want to do Susitna, Hydro, Wantana Dam, 2 or 3 hands might go up. Raise your hand if you want to use nukes, 2 or 3 hands may go up. Raise your hand if you want to burn tires, 2 hands may go up. But the bottom line is this, we're past the luxury of having what is in essence a 700 Club debate about what we should be doing about energy. We need it now. We recognized this several years ago. I wasn't even in politics in 2010 when there were commercials done by Larry DeVilbiss, the former mayor of Matsu, Dan Sullivan, the mayor here in Anchorage, about brownouts, 2010. The fertilizer plant closed in 2007 because of diminishing gas. The LNG exports ended entirely in 2017. Now, this isn't a new thing for Alaska, disagreement on energy, disagreement on how to get energy. We'll probably be posting on our website here a history of the Trans-Alaskan Oil Pipeline, which for those that don't really dive into the history, you just assume we have a pipeline and everything must have worked out because we had a pipeline. It was incredibly difficult to get that pipeline sanctioned, passed by one vote. And Vice President Spiro Agnew back in the Nixon administration cast the vote. There were environmental NGOs back then, very active like they are today. There was the issue of native claims settlement, which had to happen for the state of Alaska and for the native peoples of Alaska. There were judgments and court actions that held up the pipeline. The cost of the pipeline was greater than they initially thought, but because they were able to get that pipeline through, Alaska was transformed in terms of everything from schools to health to transportation, you name it. Even to this day, we have more oil plays coming on in Alaska. As a matter of fact, we were looking at some of the labor statistics and the job creation over the past year. Thousands of jobs have been created in the oil patch, as well as health, as well as other sectors in Alaska. As a matter of fact, we've had some of the most robust job creation here in the past year in the state of Alaska, gearing up for the future. So when we look at the future, when we look at Willow and Pika and Horseshoe and Nuna, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of barrels that will be added to the pipeline. There was a time, it wasn't more than 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, where the estimates in the pipeline today would be at about 275, maybe 300 barrels. And there was talk about actually having to dismantle part of the pipeline because it was engineered for 2 million barrels optimum flow. We're at roughly 450,000 barrels today. When these other plays come online, we'll be well over 500. At some point around 2029, we should be around 600,000 barrels of oil. And with what the Trump administration is talking about doing, moving west in the NPRA, reevaluating ANWR and the leases up there, there's a tremendous opportunity for Alaska to continue to be a net exporter. But again, focus of this press conference is what do we got going on internally, both the issues and tremendous opportunities. I have been in conversation with the incoming nominee for the Department of Interior and the Energy Czar, Doug Burgum. He's the governor from North Dakota. I know Doug. I think that was unbelievably an excellent choice by the Trump administration having Doug on board. He understands interfacing technology, you know, his background with energy in the future, and I think that's going to bode well for this country as well as for Alaska. But we're talking about different energy sources. And so when I have my official conversations with this Trump administration begin in earnest after the inauguration, I will be laying on the table issues on gas on the pipeline. I will be laying on the table our opportunities in coal. I will be laying on the table our other opportunities involving renewables. Most Alaskans probably don't know this, but as I mentioned earlier, I have a coal stove, I have a fuel oil stove, I have propane, I have a wood stove, and I have 50 solar panels that are producing more kilowattage than I use on a daily basis. It's an all-in approach that I think Alaska is going to really benefit from. But for the long-term play for Alaska, for many reasons, it's going to be gas on the slope, most likely coal. We've opened up the door for nukes in the state of Alaska, and which we'll pursue those as well. But we never want to find ourselves in this position again. And that's the message I want to give Alaskans. If this isn't a wake-up call, nothing is. If you look at what we're doing in this administration the past several years, if you look at what we've been doing with the Sustainable Energy Conference in terms of bringing investors to the state of Alaska and looking at Alaska, if you look at what we're doing on transmission lines, the discussions on storage, et cetera, it is an all-in approach. The next couple years are going to be tricky until we get this gas line going, until we get some coal, electrical fire generation going, until the small nuke industry is up and running. But we are very optimistic that the things that we are doing, touching just about every concept on electricity, generation, storage, transmission, distribution, we're very confident that we're going to get there. Next couple of years could be bumpy, but we have some plans. We have some discussions we're going to have with the the legislature on what we could do in the short term, and not just for the rail belt. This Curtis was talking about, we're talking about the entire state of Alaska can benefit tremendously from not just new technologies, but different ways of producing and distributing energy. But I want to go now to the large gas line. When I came in to office, the world was totally different than it is today. There was no war in the Ukraine. There were no wars to the extent we have now raging in the Middle East. There was talk about supercomputing. There was talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And there's been an increasing talk about data farms. There's also been talk about helping our Asian allies once again with gas. And so I was reticent for some time to talk about the large gas line. And I've said to my people for years, until we see tangible accomplishments, tangible steps, it's not really fruitful. It's not really positive to get the people of Alaska worked up over something. We've been talking about a gas line for decades and decades and decades. The large gas line has been challenged for decades. The cost, the size, the engineering, you name it. But there has been significant movement in a positive direction, not just theoretical, but actual significant movement. And we thought that today was a day, a day that we should roll out what we think are some things that people of Alaska should know about that pipeline. I believe it's closer to a reality than ever. And I'm not just saying that because I happen to be the governor at the time, but because of what Frank's going to talk about here in a moment with AGDC. We have investors in Wall Street looking at this. We have customers not just in Asia, but customers that want to come to Alaska and potentially put down data farms looking at this gas line. We have the need internally. We've had a Wood Mackenzie report that shows the viability of going with our phase 1 approach, which is the gas line only. We have oil and gas finds that didn't exist prior to just a few years ago in Great Bear, Pantheon. It's a pretty good gas too, that's low in carbon. We're in discussions with outfits such as Exxon and Hillcorp about selling additional gas coming up off the slope. So we're starting to see parts of this come closer and closer together. I will give the Biden administration credit that they were supportive of this gas line. There's no doubt. In 2020, we got all of the permits for this gas line as a result of work that was done under the Trump administration. Trump administration has made it clear that this pipeline is incredibly important and a priority for this state, for this country. And so we want to give you a little update as to where we are with the gas line. And then after that, we'll open this up for questions on any of the topics that we talked about here today, and I'm sure there'll be other topics as well. So Frank?
Thank you, Governor. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide an update to all of you. Again, what I'm here to talk about is not only an interim, but a long-term solution of a transformational project that we call the Alaska LNG project. This chart that you see here is, again, a timeline that goes back from initial oil discovery in Prudhoe Bay, and then talks about the ability to be able to bring gas to market. But before I go through that, I wanted to give some remarks. As the governor said, we received our initial or our final federal authorizations in 2020, and then under the Biden administration, they re-established or re-looked at the Department of Energy authorization. So in 2022, they gave us an updated authorization to export to non-free trade countries. Since that time, the world energy markets have been upended by the Russian invasion of the Ukraine and the conflicts in the Middle East. We heard recently from John Sims talking about the challenges that we face here at home from an uncertain supply to meet our utility needs from the Cook Inlet natural gas production. Much like the 1973 oil embargo propelled the Trans-Alaska Pipeline forward, these events have put a spotlight on the Alaska LNG project, its advantages, and greatly increased developer as well as off-taker interest. And when I say that, I'm talking about not only our Asian allies, but also, as the governor said, from Wall Street to the Gulf Coast developers to international developers, there has been increasing interest coming to Alaska looking at this project for LNG, but also for other business opportunities. Alaska's treasure trove of natural resources, including the hundreds, and this is truly astounding, the hundreds of trillions of cubic feet of North Slope natural gas continue to be viewed very positively by the world markets. Additionally, discoveries of large volumes of natural gas by independent developers, like those announced by Great Bear Pantheon, add to the tremendous amounts of gas produced daily on the North Slope, in Prudhoe Bay, Point Thompson, and other satellite fields. The Alaska LNG project will allow Alaska to deliver natural gas from a proven energy source that markets demand. Alaska LNG uniquely offers superior economics, close proximity to Asian markets driving LNG demand growth, and the ability to eliminate up to 2.3 billion tons of global emissions by replacing dirty fuel sources with clean-burning Alaska natural gas. Today, after 10 years of planning, engineering, and permitting, I'm announcing that AGDC has reached an exclusive framework agreement with a qualified energy company to privately lead and fund the development of the Alaska LNG project, including the Arctic carbon capture plant on the North Slope, the LNG export facility in Nikiski, and the pipeline which will transect the state and deliver North Slope natural gas to Alaskans. The terms of the framework agreement are being negotiated or have been negotiated. The next step is for both parties to create legally binding development agreements that will move the project forward. The company involved brings extensive U.S. and international natural gas and LNG experience to bear to this project. This effort is in line with the governor's, as well as the AGDC Board of Directors' goal of bringing private capital, expertise, and experience to advance the project through the next major work effort and a stage-gated decision process. We will hold a formal joint public announcement with the company involved when the definitive agreements are finalized. But until then, our ongoing work is governed by the non-disclosure agreements that are a standard part of commercial negotiations, and we will not be publicly naming the company at this time. The legislature granted AGDC the ability to work on confidential documents in a manner similar to private companies. I expect a formal announcement of the definitive agreements within the next few months. Once our agreement is finalized, work will start on the final development stage known as front-end engineering and design, or FEED. FEED will provide the information needed to undertake an informed final investment decision to initiate construction of the privately led $44 billion project. ADA's $50 million line of credit was critical to securing the framework agreement, and I thank the governor for his leadership and the ADA board and staff for authorizing the $50 million backstop for phase one, the pipeline to deliver North Slope gas to Alaskans. Our team is working to finalize this framework agreement with all due haste, because the sooner that this project gets underway, the sooner Alaskans benefit from our North Slope natural gas for the long-term benefits. At the same time, we are following a methodical, step-by-step approach to protect the interest of all stakeholders, including Alaskans. Now, the schedule that you see here goes back from, as I said, from the time when Prudhoe Bay oil was discovery. But at that time, the natural gas was being produced with the oil and was needed to keep the pressurization on the Prudhoe Bay so that more gas could come out with the oil. Then, up until around the time of 2015, actually authorization was granted to offtake gas from the North Slope, from Prudhoe Bay specifically, by the Alaska Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, because it was deemed that the gas could then be commercialized. So a small portion of the 8.5 billion cubic feet of gas that is produced daily would be allowed to come into the project for export. However, at that time, we didn't have a design, we didn't have our regulatory permits, and we didn't have the rights of way granted across state lands. So when AGDC was handed the project in 2017, that's what we did, which was complete the efforts of getting the regulatory process through the federal government. So from 2017 through 2020, under then President Trump, we had FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, essentially conduct the largest environmental impact statement for an energy project in the United States. And quite frankly, that's astounding. 3 years to go from initial application to conclusion of the largest project. But again, following the edicts of the National Environmental Policy Act and making sure that there was stakeholder engagement and the environmental considerations were in place. So since then, in 2020, as the governor said, we've had some world events that have come and impacted the opportunities for Alaska, whether it be the Russian invasion, whether it be the Middle East crisis, whether it be the impacts of COVID. And since, again, the challenges that we hear in Cook Inlet with the shortage of supply, then we've started looking at what is the opportunities to use Alaska LNG to be able to help, even through a pipeline or any of the facilities that we have to meet the needs of Alaskans. And so with the governor's request early in 2024, we started looking at that option for Alaska LNG to be able to do that. At the same time, we were marketing this project to potential investors as well as off-takers. And that's what has resulted in a private company stepping forward, signing an exclusivity agreement, identifying that they want to come in and take on this project. So we find ourselves here at a time that over the next few months, we'll be finalizing this and we'll be moving into that critical next stage, which is front-end engineering and design, to move this project from a concept to a reality.
Thanks, Frank. And so we want to give you a 30,000 foot and even a closer view as to what's happening. And again, I never thought Alaska had the luxury like some other states do in saying, we're going to just generate electricity from this source or this source. We're stranded up here at the top of the world. We have a population that rivals most counties in the lower 48. We have to generate our own electricity. We have to transport our own electricity. We have to distribute it. And where we can, we have to store it. In order for us to be competitive with the rest of the world, with the rest of the country, with places like Texas or Iowa or South Dakota, North Dakota, et cetera, we've got to produce a lot of energy, not just to export, but internally. And it's got to be reliable. I mentioned I have 50 solar panels. I'm glad I got them. But on a day like today, they're not producing. You need to have an underlying steady source of energy, whether that's gas, whether that's coal, whether that's nuclear. I'm very optimistic about what the future is going to bring in technologies. I mean, there's going to be technologies we haven't even thought about at this stage of the game. We know that. But gas can do so much for the state of Alaska. It can heat our homes, it can turn on our lights. It can produce it could produce fertilizer. It's a way to create ammonia, to carry hydrogen, which I think is the next step in energy. Again, Curtis and Randy have talked about things that we're doing on the renewable front. Whether we're talking about, geothermal, onshore, offshore wind, you name it. Alaska has all of it. But we have got to agree that we're done talking about theoreticals. And now we have to make sure that we put things into reality. And that's where this pipeline comes. There'll be folks that are watching this press conference, I have no doubt, or read the stories that come out after this, that the large line will be disparaged or questioned. I've questioned it for years, to be perfectly honest with you. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been hesitant to talk about it until there's some real concrete, I think, steps going forward. But I think we're entering a phase of reality for this pipeline. We'll know here, as Frank said, in the next couple of months. They're under NDAs and discussions with outfits. But the information that I get and the discussions I'm having with people seem to indicate that there's a real opportunity for the pipeline. In the meantime, we have to make sure that we keep the lights on here, we keep the heat on here, and that we project to the world that we are fixing our energy issues, not just for the short term, the midterm, but also the long term. So with that, I don't know if it's okay. Jessica, we'll open it up for questions from members of the press.
With Nat Hertz from the Northern.
Thanks. My first question is if you can ask your people not to tow our cars from the garage because we've all been there for an hour. That'd be a bummer. Second question. So everything I hear from the utilities, from the electric utilities, also from John, and I think from like the objective information that's out there, if you look at it yourself, is that it would be great if we get a gas line in some number of years or micro nuclear reactors or a huge amount of additional gas from Cook Inlet, but that right now, in fact, there's nothing that's going to get out of expiring gas contracts and a huge gas cliff that comes in like 3 years, 2028, 2029. All these other things you guys have been talking about, the big picture stuff, I think particularly the gas line, but coal as well. It's like, I don't think you suggested in your remarks that like it's going to be a tough couple of years until we get a gas pipeline. But I don't think Frank would say we're getting a gas pipeline in a couple of years. Like it's going to take a long time to build it. And I think all this other stuff we're hearing today, frankly, is like confusing policymakers and confusing the public and making it more difficult for people like John and people like the leaders of the electric utilities to do the work that they need to do to get us gas in the next couple of years to make sure that we can keep the lights on. So I guess I just am curious if like, from your perspective really directly, is there anything that we and the utilities can actually count on in a way that we could put down our pencils on these plans to import LNG that would render that not necessary? Or is it actually necessary and prudent for Alaska utilities to be importing LNG in the next couple of years?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Great question. So there's two things. There's gas from the inlet. We believe that there's still gas to be had. We want to have some discussions with the legislature. The easy, cheap gas, we believe, is going to be difficult to come by. So whatever gas we get from the inlet is going to be more expensive. We know that, but there is gas. So within a year or so, as was mentioned, there's wells being drilled by Hillcorp, Hex, and hopefully others here shortly. That gas could be turned around here in a year and put into the system. To back that up, there are discussions on importing gas. Nobody in Alaska cares for that concept. However, that concept may need to be there to ensure that the lights are turned down over the next several years. When we talk about the gas line, when we talk about coal, when we talk about transmission, that all comes together. Those projects are mid and long term. But we should know here shortly on the gas line within the next few months, we believe, with some of the work that's being done up north on gas coming from the slope. That too will be expensive gas to Fairbanks, but nonetheless, it will assist with the gas situation in the inlet. But no, we're not trying to confuse anybody. We've said during this press conference, Nat, that although we're doing things all over the state, although we're doing a number of things on the energy front, we got to make sure that we have gas here for folks on the rail belt starting, should have been years ago, but starting now so that the lights can be turned on. That's going to be incentivizing a little more production out of Cook Inlet and backing that up with the potential of imports. I'm hoping, depending upon what we do the next year or so in the inlet and what we find in the inlet, I'm hoping that that's the case, but I think the utilities are going to be prepared to import if they need to. I support the lights being turned on any way we possibly can, Nat.
I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about your planned trip to Dubai this month and who will accompany you on that trip and what you're hoping to achieve and if it's tied to anything that you mentioned in this press conference. Yeah, so we've been putting on the Sustainable Energy Conference for 3 years now. And last year we had Ambassador Strong, the UAE ambassador from the United States to the UAE. And she came up and spoke, and we had a conversation after that. She and we believe there's some tremendous opportunity to highlight Alaska to investors worldwide at a worldwide conference. That's the reason we're going over to Dubai. I don't like to travel. I'm kind of a tall guy. I think I've only left the country 3 times, twice to Japan on the gas line issue, once to Europe on a similar investment conference to get people interested in Alaska. Some people would say, well, why do you have to do that? And I to be honest with you, I asked that question the first year I came in the office. Why do we have to go and sell Alaska? Everybody knows about Alaska. They don't. When I would find that there were investments going to places in Africa or places in Asia or other places in the world looking for gas or looking for oil or looking for minerals, I began to ask the questions, why? What's wrong with Alaska? A lot of the investors told me they thought Alaska was kind of closed, that it was, I'm being honest with you, that it was, the environmentalists had basically shut it off and had created an environment that was unstable for investment. Our discussions with investors, our goal in our discussions with investors is to get them to see otherwise.
again, with the Trump administration coming in, we see tremendous opportunity to invest in America for these investors. And again, in the discussion with the ambassador, she's excited to have us go over there. She has set up meetings with investors from all over the world over in this conference. We're hoping to make contacts, bring people to Alaska. Whether this trip costs, I'm not sure, $50,000, $75,000, whatever it costs, one investment could be multitudes of that for Alaska. And the discussions being talked about, the topics being talked about over there are energy topics. Conventional energy, renewable energy, hydrogen, storage, et cetera. The very things that we've been highlighting at our conferences the past 3 years. And so some of the folks that are going are representatives from AGDC, representatives from DNR, representatives from AEA, and we're all going to present to the investors in a series of meetings throughout the week. And it's our hope that that will provide some investment here in the state of Alaska. But I am not a big fan of traveling. For me, it's painful for obvious reasons. But I also want to make sure that Alaska doesn't lose out. You have states like Georgia, Oklahoma, California, New York. They are constantly on investment, travel for investors all over the world. We haven't done a very good job of that, I think, in Alaska because we assumed people knew about Alaska. And we really looked at ourselves just as an oil province. But with all of the opportunities, I think, in renewables as well as storage, hydrogen, and our oil and gas, I think this is a good opportunity for us.
Thanks. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the discussions that you have or intend to have with President Trump about energy development here, and also how confident are you that he will be able to repeal some of these Biden-era policies that have limited resource development in Alaska in a timely manner?
Yeah, I think, so I've talked periodically with the president since he's left office. I hope to be meeting with him very soon, face-to-face on Alaska. I have been in conversations with Doug Burgum, who is the nominee for the Department of Interior. And Doug's, like I mentioned earlier, a beautiful, I think, a fantastic pick about Alaska. They understand Alaska is the answer to a lot of problems that the country has in terms of rare earths, in terms of oil, in terms of gas, that we're a solution to a lot of this. We're also a solution to, for example, our Asian allies' energy needs, as well as storage of carbon coming from our Asian allies such as the Japanese. So all we're going to be asking, and all we've ever asked for from the Trump administration, just like we asked from the Biden administration, is just allow opportunities to take place in Alaska. Allow oil and gas in Alaska to lands to be leased. Allow for the export of oil and gas. Allow for roads to be built to mineral finds. That's all I'm asking them. We're not asking them for $1 billion or trillions of dollars here or there. There is a loan guarantee concept embedded in language that was passed by Congress regarding our pipeline. But other than that, we're asking for opportunities. And so in the discussions with, early discussions with nominee Burgum, he understands that Alaska has some tremendous potential. They're very interested in helping Alaska become part of that solution. So you're going to see, I hope, a series of meetings once the president is inaugurated, his inaugural is over. You're going to see a series of meetings between us and his people on what Alaska could do, what Alaska could provide, and what the federal government could provide to help Alaska.
Next, we'll go to the phones, first with Jack Barnwell from Fairbanks Daily News Miner.
No question.
Next, James Brooks from the Alaska Beacon.
Yes, I was hoping to ask about the stopgap proposals that'll be submitted to the legislature. Should we expect to see some things along the lines of the cashable credits, things that were proposed last year, or something entirely different?
Yeah, possibly. We're still working through that here in the last few weeks here before the session, and we will probably have another press conference on that when they're rolled out. But we still got a few things we want to finalize before we make it public.
Mark Sabatini, Juneau Empire.
Hi. You said a bunch of meetings have been set up with investors. Can you categorize these investors how many of them, what types of industries they're looking at investing in, and just who they are essentially, because I imagine some questions to get raised about what are these folks' interests and what will it cost Alaska, or what is Alaska giving away to these folks in exchange for whatever money they invest?
I don't know what that last part of your question means, Mark. Give away. What do you mean give away?
Well, essentially, it's like if you agree to give folks certain incentives to invest here.
I didn't talk about giving incentives in investment, Mark. I didn't bring up investment or incentives at all.
Right. But tell me, who
Okay.
are these investors you're meeting with? Are these companies, or are they
These are
countries
investment
or
houses,
state
Mark, that
players?
invest. These are investment houses that invest worldwide. These are investment houses from across the world that are going to a conference in Dubai. But just to make sure, Mark, we're not talking about giving anything away. I'm not flying to Dubai to give stuff away. Next question.
Thank you. Jeff Landfield from the Alaska Landmine.
Hi, Governor. I wanted to ask about this Fury royalty relief. I'm not sure how much time I have, but this John Hendricks guy has done a lot of shady things with bills from Senator Giesel 2 years ago regarding property tax reduction. This year, Senator Bjorkman regarding forced kind of confiscation of overriding royalties. He's gone after state employees for refusing to reduce his property taxes 95%. He has no gas. He has 5% of the gas. He can't drill for gas without Hillcorp's rig, which they need. He appears to be, in all accounts, just a bad actor. Why is he getting a handout when he's done a lot of things that have been, I've covered and other people have covered widely over the last several years?
So, Jeff, do you want to kind of summarize the question as short as possible? The question is, why is a leaseholder in the inlet? Why are there discussions on are there ways we can produce more gas, not just from that particular leaseholder, but others?
Why is a bad actor who's resorted to very underhanded means getting rewarded when he has almost no gas and he has no way to produce or find any gas without getting Hillcorp's rig, which isn't even clear they're able to give him?
Best answer I can give you is being a leaseholder with gas leases, we're in conversations with everybody in the inlet on what it would take to produce more gas to deal with the short-term issues that we were talking about. And since he owns gas leases as well as, again, the other gas lease holders in the inlet, we're going to continue with those conversations to get more gas out of the inlet.
Well, instead of rewarding him, why can't you guys pull the leases? Isn't that another option?
We're not rewarding anybody. I'm just being honest with you, Jeff. We're not rewarding anyone. The previous question was, what are we giving away in the Middle East? What we're doing is following the Constitution and state laws with regard to gas leaseholders in the inlet in an effort to get more gas out of the inlet so we can get that to the utilities to make sure that we have heat and lights for the next few years.
We're going to move on to the next question. Tim Bradner, Alaska Legislative Digest. Tim, are you on? Okay, we'll move.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this. I don't know how much time we have, but I've got a question for three of the presenters, but I'll ask the first one, then I can give my turn to somebody else. This is for Randy at Ada. Randy, you mentioned two coal projects. Is one of them the Squintna project that Flatlands Energy is working on?
That's correct.
And just a follow-up, what is the form of participation Ada is looking at? It might be like a local matching grant to a federal grant or a loan guarantee of some kind? Or what is the instrument? How might Ada be involved in it?
Sure. So very early stage and no specific form of assistance at this point. Very early in due diligence.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim. Go ahead and send your follow-up questions afterwards. We're limited on time. So we're going to move to the final question from Ruth Liao from Bloomberg.
Hi, thanks so much. I was wondering if you could clarify whether the same company is going to look to develop the LNG export project and pipeline, or if you're going to look to bring in other partners. And then can you also just provide a quick update on how commercial discussions are advancing with global buyers? Thanks.
Thank you. This is Frank Richards with the Alaska Gas Line Development Corporation. So I believe your first part of the question was about who is AGDC going to partner with to be able to advance this project. As I said in my remarks, we have entered an exclusivity agreement with a privately led energy company to take on the lead role in advancing the Alaska LNG project. And that's all phases of the project, whether it be the initial pipeline phase to the full gas treatment to full liquefaction. So that company, again, are working on those binding project development agreements that will then lay the framework on how we are going to best proceed to get to a final investment decision.
So, again, thanks for being part of the conference today, the press conference. Again, it's internally, we're going to continue to work our energy issues. Here in Cook Inlet, with regard to gas, as was mentioned, we're going to try and get more gas out of the inlet through our leaseholders. The utilities, in their own discussions, are going to work at having backup if they need to bring gas from outside. We hope that's not the case, or if it is, it's minimalized. At the same time, we're advancing the pipeline. We'll be advancing coal projects. We'll be advancing more transmission, more distribution, more storage, more renewables, you name it. I think, again, for the next couple of years, we're going to have to rely on the inlet and some backup. But I think we're going to have some great announcements here in the next couple of months regarding the pipeline, as well as some of these energy projects that we're looking at. And so, again, as I've always said, Alaska's future is ahead of us. I think the next 50 years is going to be fantastic for Alaska. When we get back from our investor conference, I'm certainly will roll that into a discussion we'll have at the beginning of session with the press as well as the legislature. But again, I'm optimistic. Alaska's been counted out so many times, and not only are we still here, but I think we got a tremendous future for our kids and grandkids. So with that, I want to thank you all, and we will talk with you. We're going to go back in the room for a second.